Good afternoon. Welcome to the Creative Coast workshop for today, selling on Etsy. I'm Jen Bonet with Creative Coast, and as many of you know, that we are running Tuesday and Thursday lunchtime topics to educate folks on moving their business online or getting new skills in the online world to help support themselves generate revenue for their business during these crazy times. Today we've asked Mark Sutton, who is a serial entrepreneur and mentor at the Savannah SCORE chapter, to talk to us about selling on Etsy, where he has a very, very successful store. And so Mark, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and we will get going. Thanks for being here, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. Great to be here. I just want to start off by saying I hope that everyone is staying well and kind of handling these crazy times that we're in well, and that loved ones are safe. Again, I think that's kind of the most important thing on everyone's mind right now. As I thought about, just kind of going through this session with selling on Etsy, it's something that I think opens up possibility kind of right now where people are sort of forced to be remote and not physical. And while, that wasn't something that kind of inspired me to start selling here, it certainly is relevant right now. So thank you. I am on what I think is a pretty stable internet connection, but if anybody has trouble hearing me or Jen, if I start breaking up, let me know and I can certainly kind of call in if that's a problem. So I guess why don't I proceed along if everybody can see my screen okay.
Yep, no problems.
Terrific. So just a little bit of introduction about kind of my shop is, as Jen mentioned, I sell nautical chart prints. So the shop name is Nautical Chart Prints on Etsy. I am the shop owner. And what we do is pretty straightforward, sell reproduction prints of nautical charts. We've got a collection of about 2,400 items right now. So, maps, really kind of nautically themed coastlines, Great Lakes from all over the country, primarily some, Caribbean and throughout the world, but that's what we do. Started to expand the collection into engraved glassware. With the same kind of, islands, harbors, coastlines, also carafes and serving boards. So that's sort of how, I've thought about expanding what we do. Been doing this now for a number of years since late 2014. And really kind of how I got started in all this is, by day I'm a technology marketer, and I've been involved with marketing, various kinds of technology for nonprofits, e-commerce technology, digital publishing products. And, so this was really a way of marrying kind of, many of the things that I did kind of in that role with, some of my passion, which is being on the water and that kind of thing. And that's really kind of the genesis of how this started. Really kicked off, early days. I started dabbling just as kind of a side hustle mode with some affiliate marketing. That really transition for me into selling items, which is how I found my way to Etsy. So sell on Etsy, Amazon, eBay. Also have our own website where we're doing this, but Etsy really stands out. It's driving just a huge amount of sales for us right now relative to the others. The things that have drawn me to it, it's an easy platform in terms of getting listings on and managing. There really is a very strong and loyal buyer community, which, having, put together, our own website, it's easy to put together a website, relatively speaking. Getting people there and customers to your front door is definitely something that's much more of a challenge. And the fees are fairly reasonable on Etsy, I find, relative to, say, on Amazon. And that's kind of, a little bit of background about how I got there. For any of you who aren't familiar with Etsy, I encourage you to check it out. It's a great place to shop as well as sell all kinds of interesting, gifts and items. They've really done a terrific job of attracting more sellers over time, which I guess in one way of looking at that is it's a little bit more competition, but also a lot of buyers too. About 45 million buyers, 60 million products, and 2.3 million shops are selling on Etsy. So, it really is, if it's, items that you wouldn't necessarily think of going to, say, an Amazon for, things that are handmade, handcrafted, vintage. It's a terrific place to sell those kinds of items. In terms of what I wanted to go over today, just a little bit of an agenda. This is kind of my playbook. These are things that I've sort of, learned through osmosis over the years, kind of, seeing what has worked, what hasn't worked. Things that I've done and observed. It's all white hat. I mean, I guess that's kind of going back to, when I got involved with affiliate marketing, and even just some of the ways that people are climbing to the top of Amazon. I've always held kind of a long-term philosophy of how to play the game versus gaming the system. And there's definitely, history where people have kind of, sold a lot very quickly or kind of risen to the top of the search ranks, only to have the algorithms, catch up with them. And so I've always taken kind of a long ball approach to how I go about this. And so I'll talk about it from that perspective. I think that, hopefully this is useful for people who are looking to jump in to Etsy and are kind of brand new, maybe haven't started a shop yet, or people that are already selling things on Etsy. Maybe there's some tips or tricks here that will help to grow those. And then I guess just the last thing is, it really does take work, even though it's online. It's definitely not a 100% passive income. And it's also not one of those things where it's an overnight success. It takes time. And I think it's about the enjoyment of the process and the growing of a business. From my perspective, as I kind of thought about this, back to that long ball approach, rather than trying to understand the algorithm, which nobody knows how it works intentionally, I've always kind of just taken regardless of what platform it is, this kind of view. They've got a lot of buyers, they've got a lot of products, and the degree to which they can match those buyers with products to maximize their revenue, that's what they're doing. That's what the algorithms are all about. That's what they're trying to do. So, kind of keeping that in mind, it's like doing the right things. What are the ways that I can try to attract the right buyers who are looking for what I sell to my store? And I feel like I'll be rewarded for that going forward. So, one of the things you hear me talk about as we go through this today is this idea of conversion rate. And I guess in my opinion, I feel like the conversion rate, as long as, and in the dashboard, they present what's your conversion rate and sort of, here's how many visits you're getting and how much traffic we're sending you. Here's how many orders you're generating. Here's how much revenue you're generating. And is it up, is it down? And, I feel like that's probably the guiding force for them too. So it's something I kind of keep my eye on, pretty intently, just to see, am I earning the traffic? So I'll keep coming back to that. And certainly if there's questions along the way, by all means, happy to address any of them. So just jumping right into the playbook. For me, it's the basics at first, and it's just setting up elements of the shop. So there's, a bit of it's pretty straightforward. It might take a few hours, but it's making sure that you get the appearance of your shop, your policies in place. I really find that that's something where you might want to spend some time and kind of think about shipping policies, return policies, exchange policies. And what they're really looking to do is just make sure that there's very clear guidelines and rules that you're setting out so that customer expectations are being well set about when they interact with your shop. And so there's a bunch of different things that you can set up here: shipping, taxes, and so forth. Who are your production partners if you're using them? And it does take a little while. I found over time that I got some of these filled out, and I kept getting messages saying, you got to fill out the rest of these. And I took it seriously, because I think that they feel if you're incomplete in this area, then it says something about you as a shop and a store owner. So I think that this was one of the things that I circled back to after a little bit of time. The listing template, what the approach I've taken, I mentioned I've got about 2,500 items in the shop right now. I think it's 2,400. And I have pretty much the same listing description for all the prints, let's say, and for all the glasses. The thing that changes is what is the print of, or what is the glass design of. But the way I've started to view this is, rather than go through the work of creating, a totally unique kind of almost like marketing copy for each one of these. This is really where, when somebody finds your item and and they're considering buying it, what are the 101 questions that they're going to want to know before they buy it? And in my case, so selling prints, it's what kind of paper are you using? What kind of ink are you using? Is this printed on, a laser jet at home, or is this professionally printed? What size is it? What's the weight of the paper? Can I do customizations? And, it's the list of things that people would come back to me time and time again. So kind of ultimately, built out this template to understand and anticipate where expectations could get off track, or kind of what is somebody who's getting ready to push buy now thinking about, to make sure that I'm doing an adequate job of addressing all those questions. So, for me, kind of getting that listing template set up as you get started, or if you're already selling, it's making sure that you think about what those questions are. Kind of the next piece is just thinking about your products, your positioning, and the pricing. As I thought about, as I presented that slide earlier, 60 million products, 2.3 million shops, how do you stand out? And, the process that I went through, and again, I wasn't, I sort of, got into this, by selling just a handful of maps, seeing some of them sold and expanding from there. I feel like it's selecting a niche where you can differentiate. If you were to go onto Etsy, and you're going to find all kinds of categories where you're going to be able to sell, but what makes you different? What makes you stand apart? And for me, it was about a niche. It was about, the nautical charts. There's lots of shops that are selling general maps from all over the world. And for me, it was really being, focused on the nautical and kind of the chart aspect of things. And I think that the other thing that sort of emerged out of this for me was the recognition that my business is, it's long tail versus bestseller. 2,400 SKUs is a lot. And there's, 4 to 5 different sizes or variations for each one of those. So it's really about, just the recognition that I sell, a small amount of a lot of items rather than a large amount of a few items, and other businesses on Etsy are exactly the other way around, but it's sort of recognizing kind of where you are in this. Now, when I started out trying to figure out the pricing, I didn't get too analytical on it, other than, I wanted to see what print sold for. And so I literally just logged in and just kind of, I tried to understand what people were paying for these things. I found some of the top sellers. Okay, what's an 18 by 24 print selling for roughly? And, picked a number that was kind of comfortably in the middle, didn't want to be the low cost or the high cost provider, and really took it from there. And it's kind of, it's something I haven't really changed very much, if at all, over the last many years. And the approach I took was, I wanted to make sure that I was pricing it for velocity and for rapid sales, rather than the margin of each product. And then I'd worry about my cost structure as I got going. And so, when I worked with a third-party printer on these, and when I first walked into them and I was selling 0 prints, I basically took retail price, and over time, as I was doing thousands of prints, I was able to get the price in line so that my margins did go up. And then lastly, for me, it was really just focusing on a no inventory kind of solution. I wanted to be cash positive from day one. So I take an order, I get an order, I fulfill an order. And, I think with Etsy, a lot of the kinds of products and what makes Etsy unique is some of the personalization and the fact that these are kind of different sort of gifts or items that you would use. So I think that no inventory is actually a positive part of this platform versus, say, an Amazon. On the right-hand side, there's a tool that I've used a little bit. Might be something to check out if you're thinking about getting into this. It's called Craft Count. It really helps you find who are the most successful sellers in each category. So as you're getting into this, you might take a look and see, okay, what are you up against? If you're selling jewelry, do you want to focus on a particular kind of jewelry, and really understand what the different niches are, and what the pricing is for your particular niche, and just also try to get a sense for, what's the volume, like what is a successful seller doing on Etsy, where you can start to get an idea for, where your business might get to over time. The next one for me is kind of, thinking about getting found on Etsy. And, I'm going to talk a little bit about the service towards the end, which I think is a big piece of it. But for me, I focused quite a bit of time on just making sure that I get found for the things that were important. And, on this, I really look at that Etsy search bar as kind of being the key. They do present, how shoppers find you. So the majority of the shoppers that come to my shop are being sent to me by Etsy. They're starting to do some off-site advertising on, Google Shopping and things like that. But it really is how well I'm performing in search is my belief. And what I like to see, if you look at that top graphic where you've got, the up 33%, up 20%, I feel like that's sort of, for me, an indication of like, how am I doing in their eyes? If I continue to effectively get them significant amounts of revenue, then they're going to continue to privilege me with more traffic coming my way. So that's just sort of a little sanity check in terms of how do they feel that I'm doing. I also, like I showed in that initial slide, kind of keep an eye on the conversion rate and the visits to order ratio. And then kind of down below, they will provide a nice little summary of, okay, here's the views, here's the visits, here's the orders. And, if you take a look at the orders and the revenue side of things, it's up slightly more, so 12% year over year and 12% year over year, versus, the total views and the total visits, up about 1% and up about 6%. So what this says to me is that they're giving me a slightly larger amount of traffic, but it's converting at a better rate, which means that they're getting smarter about what traffic to send me, which I think is a positive and a bit of a virtuous cycle. So these are some of the things that I tend to keep an eye on as we go. Just talking through kind of the the listing anatomy of getting found and helping to generate sales. The things that I focus on in putting together a listing are absolutely the pictures, and making sure that there's very clear pictures. So I'll get into a little bit about what's involved with that in just a couple of moments. The listing titles are also very important, and are something that I tend to really focus on, making sure that these titles are very descriptive and very prescriptive of what is involved with my product. So I tend to be very crisp about exactly kind of what is the product, and not get into too much extenuous detail. Now, some other vendors, I think they really, add a lot more onto this, with the thinking that the search engines will kind of pick up other kinds of attributes about this. And I think that there may be some truth to that. The tags down below, and I'll touch on this, and because I think that this is a really important time. I do spend quite a bit of time on the tags for each one of my product listings. So when setting up a listing, you can have up to 13 tags that can be used to describe each and every listing. And so it's strongly encouraged to use all 13. Sometimes I find myself struggling to do that, but really what that looks like for me is the things that people are going to be searching that might pertain to and help the right people find this product. So as you can see what I've got in the bottom here, it's really, it's areas. It's the specific areas on this map that I've got that people may be searching that are going to be important to the way they find and that they're finding the right thing. So I'll be very diligent in terms of making sure when I'm listing one of these that I'm doing a little bit of research, which I'll show you in just a moment, and filling these in to really help make sure that the right people are finding these listings and that the listing is relevant. So a little bit about how I do this is, on the front end when you're just searching on Etsy, like a shopper would be, you can type in a term, and up top you can see I've typed in Tybee, and what pops up, and it's the same way on Amazon and same way on eBay. It'll show you what the most popular searches are. It'll start to pre-fill. So, in this case, Tybee Island map, and so forth. And so, where this helps me is, how to frame that title and what to put in the tags as well. And just for example, some of the maps of Tybee Island, it's called Tybee Roads. I guess that was the technical term. And, I started creating some of the titles around Tybee Roads, but people won't search that. And so it really kind of helped make sure that, my titles are moving towards Tybee Island rather than Tybee Roads, to help make sure that it pops up. So that when somebody does type in Tybee Island map, as you can see on that sort of screen to the right-hand side, it's making sure that my maps and my listings are showing up high on that search results page. And so I feel like those tags and the title really have a lot to do with it. And so this is something that I'll spend the time on to really understand, what are those more search terms, so that I can make sure that I'm tailoring the title and the listing for those. Kind of similarly on the back end, this in the administrative area, Etsy shows you what terms generated the most traffic to your site, to your shop, and to your listings. As you can see here, it's pretty exhaustive. It's like 50 plus pages, but it literally goes through and it just shows you how many, what the exact terms were that brought how many visits. So, I'll spend time here to go through and see what are the terms that are being searched, and just making sure that I'm going back through, adding the tags, making sure that the listing reflects it. And, in my case, there's a simple formula that has kind of emerged, which is people will type in map of location name, maps of location name, location name map, location name maps. And then you can interchange chart and maps in there. But, it's kind of over the time, just really appreciating what people are searching for that brings them, and then making sure that I'm using that, incorporating that into the title, the keywords, and the listings. I mentioned images and image quality, and I think that this is when speaking for myself as a shopper, when I get to a listing, I want to see a nice image. I want to see things like it needs to be well shot. If it's dark or kind of clearly on somebody's kitchen table, I'm less inclined to buy it than if it's a nice version like this cutting board on the right hand side, where it's nicely shot, kind of the way it would be used. Am I getting multiple angles, just so I kind of answer the various questions that I've got? Does it show the product in use, so that I really kind of get a sense as to, see myself using it? And does it show all the important detail? If there's something there that, might be a surprise to people when they get it, make sure you show it. Just again, making sure that there's no, missed expectations when somebody gets something. It's better for them to know that up front. And I guess my approach has been, I'd rather not have a customer who's negatively surprised than sell another unit where somebody's not terribly excited about it. It's going to reflect in your seller reviews. And that's going to be a problem to overcome in terms of your shop if you start getting a lot of negative reviews. So something else that I've done is when I post these listings, every listing stays active and live as long as there's inventory for 4 months, and then you have to relist it. I typically do a limited quantity. 3 tends to be the number that I do. Sometimes, a little bit more, a little bit less than that. What this tends to do is when it's presented on the front end to the customers, it will say something like, hey, there's only 3 left. Or like, any of us who have ever been, booking travel, it's, the old, there's 2 seats left at this rate. And so it sort of encourages a little bit of urgency to go ahead and make the decision for that. So I think that there's something there. The other thing is that, you'll get to a point where these get sold out and then I'll have to renew. I believe that there may be a short-term boost when a product is renewed. The search engine will, maybe give it a little bit of extra exposure just so they can, learn more about it. I think that, some sellers that I've read don't subscribe to that. Others think that it's true. There's something that's in the Etsy seller handbook that would that actually says that they give it a short-term little boost. So it's just something that I've done, and the degree to which it's worked, it's hard to quantify, but it's something that I think has been effective. Shipping is I think an important one here, and I think it's one of the things that I've found to be one of the more dynamic aspects of Etsy over the last couple of years. They're really making a big push for free shipping. Obviously, consumers like free shipping, and if there's 2 items that are sitting right next to one another, one has free shipping, one doesn't, chances are you're going to pick the one that has free shipping. So I have gone ahead and started to offer free shipping for items over $35. Many more our merchants are selling free shipping no matter what the cost, and others aren't. I do believe, and they've gone ahead and they've stated that priority, if you offer free shipping, priority placement in US search is what you get. So they encourage offsetting the shipping charges with an increased fee. So, that's something that I've started to employ, again, just to increase the velocity of my listings and make sure that I'm staying near the top of search rank. The other thing that I think is extremely important is fast shipping. And this is one of the things that when I see feedback that gets left, it's typically, fast shipping is one of the main things. It'll be like 5-star review, shipped extremely fast. Thank you very much. The other one that I'll touch on is, excellent communication. Very rarely is it, oh my gosh, this map was like incredible beyond my belief. Sometimes you get that because it is good quality, but shipping really does matter. The timeliness, at least for the products that I'm selling, a lot of times they're intended as gifts. So there's always kind of that time sensitivity. And that's, something that not only do people appreciate it and does it increase your feedback, but also if you're shipping in a very quick window, Etsy knows that you're responsive, that you're not leaving people out there to wait, and they reward you, I believe. And then also shipping via trackable services, so people can see it and they know that, and Etsy knows that it's arrived. Those are very important pieces as well. So a small piece, but I think one that definitely I've experienced has an impact in terms of customer satisfaction, number one, but also how Etsy goes about viewing you as a seller. A little bit on competition, and kind of what I've done and how I viewed competition is I've basically just gone and done the same searches that I think a customer would do to see who else is selling. I like to understand, how many competitors are out there. And if you are new to Etsy or thinking about getting into a new niche, is it a crowded niche or is it an empty niche? And I guess I've always been of the impression that if nobody else is selling what you're selling, it's a little bit of a red flag unless you're selling, some sort of, variation on a well-established category. Because I think that you want to make sure that you're selling in an area where there is search volume and there are customers. And likewise, if it's terribly crowded, it just kind of gives you an idea about maybe how niche-y you should get. I like to understand, are they established, and also what kind of volume are they doing? Some of the things that I'll always do is I'll look to some of the leaders for, just inspiration. I'll look at what are they doing differently? What are their titles? What kind of images? This is a competitor that I've got, and if you look over at the left-hand side, they've got a lot more images than I do. They've done a really nice job of doing zoom ins of different areas of the map. And it's a question that I'll get a lot. It's like, does this map have, my town or my beach on it? Where these guys have done a very nice job of kind of answering those questions. And I think it's effective. It takes a lot of work, but it's effective. I'll look at their descriptions, their policies, pricing, keywords. One of the things that's kind of interesting down at the bottom here, the area that I've got outlined in red, is at the bottom of every listing, it has the tags. So if you recall a few slides ago, I showed you the 13 tags that I add. They actually reveal those when you look at a competitor's listing. So it gives me some insight in terms of what are some of the best sellers using for tags. And it just helps me, kind of become educated on what I should be doing, or gives me some ideas about how I should be thinking about tags and so on. Yes.
You're going to answer the question right here. I was going to ask, how did you know? You mentioned you want to know volume comparables, but it looks like you're about to answer that question.
I'll answer a little bit. Yeah, it's one of the so what I'll do is I find this. Here's a competitor, Old Maps. So what they do is when you go to you just basically click on Old Maps, and it shows you're now in their shop. And so this tells you how many sales they've got. It also tells you how long they've been around. So I mean, these guys are doing pretty good business. These guys sell all kinds of different maps, not just nautical maps. And then when you click on this 13969 sales, it basically opens up this window on the right-hand side so I can see what they're selling. So the way I've used this is, helps me sort of rationalize, okay, these guys are selling a lot of non-nautical maps. So it helps me kind of understand that. When I do see some of the nautical maps, I've said, okay, I don't have that map in my collection. Let me go try to find some maps of that specific area or that specific vintage. So it kind of helps me understand what they're being successful with. The other thing that I've done is if you look in the lower left-hand corner, so I've maintained a spreadsheet. And every few months, I basically go in and I see what that number is, that 13969. I also see how many items that they've got for sale and how many days it's been since I last checked. And so what this basically lets me do is it says, okay, how many days are these guys, or how many sales per day are these guys getting? And it just gives me a little bit of a benchmark as to, okay, how am I doing compared to them? But it also gives me an idea of, okay, as I jump into this category and start selling, how many sales am I going to see? Is it like, what's good? Is 2 sales a day good? Is 200 sales a day good? And so it just kind of helps me sort of understand what some of the dynamics are. And I've got in this spreadsheet, I've probably got about, 2 dozen or so that I kind of keep an eye on, really just kind of as racehorses to see, am I kind of accelerating faster, or are people, blowing by me? And this is just one way that I've done it. Does that answer the question, or are there other things you'd want to know?
No, that answers it. I was wondering, does Etsy have tools or an open API that allows developers to build apps? Like if you look at an Amazon thing, there's all these apps that you can go and find out, like Jungle Scout will tell you what's selling best and how many top sellers have. Does Etsy have a kind of a developer network like that that's building software to support Etsy sellers, or is that Amazon?
There's nothing that I've seen which is kind of like a seller tool the same way, say, a Jungle Scout is. At least nothing that I've come across. That craft count that I showed you, they have sort of who the top sellers are. There's others like that. Like if you type, if you Google like what's my Etsy seller rank, there are some that will say, okay, here's the top sellers today, and here's how many items they sold. So I guess the answer is there likely are some services out there that are using an API of some sort to pull that data back, but I haven't seen them packaged up as a tool for me as a seller. And it may be that I just haven't looked hard enough, but I think it's a great question and certainly something that's valuable.
And then my other question was on the previous slide, I think it was, where you showed the tags. I thought it was interesting that this Old Maps, or whoever it is, Old Map, is using a lot of generic keywords as their first set of keywords before they get into location based.
They are, yeah. I thought so too.
Kind of interesting. So they're not necessarily going long tail. They're about half are just generic, and then they go long tail.
Yeah, that's something I noticed too. And as I was putting this together, I was kind of thinking to myself the same kind of thing. It's like, I tend to put in like nautical chart and things like that. I've stayed away things like antique map and that kind of thing, but I have started to add terms like wall art because of this, nautical chart, and a few general terms, just trying to figure out what those are. I've been, and I think it's definitely something that I need to continue to refine in terms of what's that mix of general versus specific terms to start getting people in and kind of how people are finding me. But I agree. The customer service, I think, is key, and it's I think it's probably one of the bigger areas of focus that I've had. I think that my secret weapon here has been, it's not terribly secret, is there's an Etsy seller app, and that little icon on the right hand side is for it. It's not to be confused with the Etsy shopper app, right? So it's a different app that if you want to buy stuff on Etsy, you can do it. But this is something if you are a seller. And what I use this for is whenever there's messages, there's a lot of messaging that takes place on the platform. So it will be things like, hey, I'm thinking about ordering this map. Can you tell me how long till it ships? Can you tell me if this town is on it? Could you do it in this certain color? It might be people who message you and say, what's the update on my shipping status, or, whatever it is. There's a lot of dialogue that goes back and forth. And I think that in my view, in my experience, the seller rating, those stars that you get, it is really, I think, the communication, the shipping time, and also, product quality, obviously. But, I feel like where you kind of go above and beyond and get the 5 stars, I have found is, are you responsive? Are you helpful? And like a lot of times it's almost like a chat session where somebody will ask me a question and inside of a minute I'll have an answer back to them, and they're kind of blown away that they can talk to somebody and get answers that quickly. And I think it gives them confidence that you're going to be somebody who's responsible and thoughtful and get something out quickly to them. And I think that not only does it generate more sales, but it also generates, in my mind, more favorable, more 5-star reviews, which I think is quintessential for this. And then Etsy is also starting to rank or set expectations for, hey, this seller gets back to you in 2 hours or less typically. Whereas if you don't do that, it's, who knows when this seller will get back to you. It might be, several days. And so I think that people absolutely value the communication piece of it. So, for me, that's been, this seller app has been a real, key tool. The shipping quickly, and also I guess on returns and exchanges, I've probably, almost to an extreme and possibly to a fault been, accommodating when there's exchanges or returns. And, I've had, somebody who, for one of the engraved glasses, sent me over, here's the name of my friend that I'd like to have engraved on this. Dutifully engraved the name exactly as it was spelled. Turned out that it was Connors with an O, not an E, Connors. And, they were pretty demanding that, you know, I change those and get it out to their guest, because you know, I had to just bite my tongue and do it. And it's one of those things where I feel like if, you know, whatever you do, it's not just Etsy, you know, if you are good, upstanding, kind of accommodating, you are going to be rewarded with positive feedback. And I think maybe as importantly, you're not going to get negative feedback. And I think that that really helps to inspire confidence in others. So I think that being accommodating to the degree that you can with exchange and returns, I found goes a long way. And it really helps to, I think, drive the rank of the store and the velocity of the sales. I also do advertising on Etsy, so I can set my daily budget. I don't know, it's a little bit of an eye chart here, but on that first image, you can see what I spent in the past 30 days, and then you can see what was generated from the advertising. So I guess my feeling is that I will keep increasing that as long as I've got a favorable return. And, you know, in this case, I put, you know, $1 in and I get $4 out. So it's, you know, with the margins that I have, this makes sense for me. And, you know, I continue to do this. And, you know, when there's peak seasons, like around Christmas time, I'll up the budget. And then right after that, I'll decrease the budget. But I find that I also feel that there's probably somewhere in the algorithm that I have no insight to, is that if you are supporting and generating dollars, and if you are a vendor who's generating a lot of revenue for Etsy in terms of not just sales, but also in terms of spending dollars, my view is that they're going to favor you in search more than somebody who spends $0 in sales. I have no evidence or insight into the algorithm, but I feel like there's probably some sort of cause and effect there. And what's nice about it is you can see exactly what your return is down to the exact sale level. And you can even go so far as to see in the upper right-hand side of this screen how much has been spent on which item and what the conversion rate and what the revenue generated has been. And on the lower right-hand side, you can see that your advertised listings just show up in a premium space kind of before any of the other listings. Really just to wrap up a bit here, this is a quick summary of what I believe the algorithm rewards. Again, it's just kind of the things that I've focused on. I'm sure that there are other things on here. I'm sure that there's also things here that are debatable about, you know, to what degree are they important. But, you know, it really goes back to that, you know, what are these guys after? You know, what is sort of their North Star in terms of how they want, you know, they want to please their buyers. And if they can do a really excellent job of making sure that they very effectively, you know, help their buyers find the products that they want to buy, down to the keyword, right? So somebody types in Tybee Island maps, where do they send them so they generate the most revenue and the most happy customers? I think that these are the things, and I won't read them off to you, just see here if there's anything that's kind of different than what we have talked about. Oh, I guess over on the right-hand side, longevity, I think that's probably one. I feel like if you've got a little bit of a track record, that probably goes in your favor. There's something called vacation mode that I've resisted using. And basically it's exactly what it sounds like. If you go away for vacation, you can't fulfill for a week or for 2 weeks, you can put your shop in vacation mode. The reason I haven't done that is I've heard that it takes your items out of search, and then to rebuild kind of your search status takes a little bit of time. And to hear Etsy say it, yeah, it takes, you know, a little bit of time, and then you get right back to where you were. To hear sellers talk about it on some of their message boards, I've heard, you know, quite a few say they never got back to where they were. So my approach has always been to just set expectations to when people order. I will just message them and say, I'm not going to be able to get this out to you for another 10 days. Is that okay? Or I can cancel the order. And people generally say, that's fine. Thanks for the communication. On rare occasion, people will say, cancel the order. So that's kind of the approach that I've taken there. And, you know, if this is kind of a helpful summary, these are the kinds of things that I tend to focus on. And I believe over time, raise products and raise a shop in the search
Mark, we
ranking.
have a question from Rodney, and he wants
Yes.
to know, Rodney, you want to go off mute and ask your question yourself?
Sure, it's Romney. Hey there.
Rodney.
Yeah, that's okay. My question is it okay to launch an Etsy shop with, let's say, 3 or 4 products when you really have upwards of 20 to 25 planned, or should I wait till I have all the products ready to go, beautifully photographed and everything like that?
I would say jump right in, and so starting off with, I've got the 2,400 maps. I think I literally started with like 3 and put them up. And what it forced me to do was to get the policies in place that I talked about. And also it helps me think through actually getting that listing kind of template in place and all the things that you might, what are the questions? And so I think it accelerates that. And I also think it starts getting you going, and it gets that that started. I think that what you will typically do is you may learn with getting 3 up that maybe impact your the other 20 that you'll get up. So I would say just take those first steps, start learning, and then you'll probably always be adding to it. So getting started, I think, is really important.
Thank you.
Mark, I was wondering, do you use social media to drive people to your store, your website? Do you do any off Etsy advertising to drive people?
I do a little bit of social media, and it's really something I need to ramp up. So I use Facebook, I use Instagram, and it's something that I've been doing regularly, but not as frequently as I think I probably should. And I view that as an area of opportunity for me. I have not done too much offsite advertising. I think it also presents an opportunity for me. So Google AdWords. So Etsy is now buying some traffic off of Google. So I've held off on Google because I feel like they're probably doing a very good job of figuring out what AdWords produce customers and where to send them. But Facebook is one that's intriguing for me. I've really done nothing but just dabble very lightly in that. I feel like just given the targeted nature and being able to, target advertising to people that have some sort of affiliation or live on or near certain locations, there's definitely a correlation that I think would make sense. And so it's something that I feel like now, as I'm starting to scale a little bit more and I've got kind of a good array of products, I think trying to figure out probably Facebook advertising for me is going to be next. And I guess the other thing that I do, this is a little bit off of, of Etsy, but I'm using some email marketing tools on our website. I've been using Klaviyo. Started to use that over the last few months, which I found pretty effective in terms of, some of the nurture flows and getting people to come back to that website. So while that's not advertising per se, it's making sure that I do a better job of working with the people that do visit the site and my email marketing list, which I've been building.
And is that site, what site is that platform built on?
Klaviyo, it's an email marketing tool. It's kind of like, maybe think of it as like a HubSpot or a MailChimp.
Yeah, I know that. I was asking nauticalchartsprints.com.
Oh, sorry.
Is that Shopify? Is that WooCommerce?
It is Shopify.
Cool. And just for clarification, this is like a side hustle for you, right? So you've got your Whole Speed Designs marketing day job. So how many hours, per day or per week do you kind of spend on this side hustle?
I would say that probably spending a couple of hours per day. I'd say 1 to possibly 2, and what that includes is if you were to factor in adding new inventory and doing some of the work to get new maps, getting kind of each day I need to send maps into the printer or the engraver, need to pick those up, need to ship those out. And so that's probably a rough estimate of what I'm spending. It's not necessarily every day. There's some days where I can get away with doing nothing. And then just, do a little bit more the following day. So, that's kind of what it's emerged to. Some busy times of the year, it's probably a lot more chaotic than is good, specifically around the holidays.
Awesome. Any other questions from our audience?
Well, I'm happy to answer any now if you've got them, or, here's my information, and certainly feel free to, connect with me offline. I'd be happy to, answer questions that come up, or if you want to just kind of connect on this. And if you've got ideas for me for things that have worked for you, I'm always interested to learn those as well.
Well, if there's no other questions, we'll wrap it up. Thank you, Mark. That was awesome. I really enjoyed it. I've never really played around with Etsy other than as a consumer. I actually have bought some maps on there, but not the kind of maps that you do. City maps with neighborhoods as kind of Chicago, Atlanta, with the different neighborhoods in calligraphy. So it was fun to see this. And thank you all for joining us. I'm gonna mute or stop our recording. Boom.